It is miraculous, I think. And that's the thing, we talk about miracles as coming from other places. But, I mean, music is connected to another realm.
That's what this film does all the way through. It's amazing.
In a whisper.
Yes, this is now an ASMR session.
And then we just descend into silence.
Totally. Yeah, I know. That's ultimately what you really want. You told me
that is before. I don't want to. Yeah, the cage for.
I know.
4:42.
I know. I'm sorry. I can probably get away with that for about 7 minutes, and then your PR's going
to. Well, it wasn't much longer than that, isn't it? 12 minutes. The cage.
I mean, cage is 12. I can
do
half of it.
Okay.
All right.
We'll send people to sleep.
It's not going to work.
No,
it's not going to work.
But that's what a magnificent. Thank you. That's fantastic. I mean, Todd Field will be very happy.
Well, it's interesting for me. There's a lot to talk about in this film, and it's wonderful to meet you, by the way. And thank you.
Yes, likewise.
Thank you for taking us into some incredible stories and committing so wholesale to these stories and to these characters. And it's a rare thing to be able to experience something through someone else's eyes, and forget about your life for a second. So I've always appreciated and loved your work. So thank you.
I like to forget about my life for a second.
I bet you do. Yeah. I bet you do. Well, you know what? You just said as well before something that was really revealing and lovely, and I'll put it in a nice way, which was that the work, what you do, and there's that, and that's the purpose, and that's the desire, and then there's a little bit of this that has to come along for the ride. And I sort of wonder what that balance is like for you, because when you're not working, you're not out and about. You live your life.
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes there's a lot to say in not. I don't see work. It sounds sort of counterintuitive, particularly in America, because I think there's a sense that in American acting culture is that you have to bring of yourself, the personal details of your life into your work.
Yeah.
Whereas
that's the marketing.
Yeah. I see it as an escape or an expanse of that which I know. And when you're working on a film like Tar, there was just so much I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's a departure. My favorite thing in the entire universe is when you watch a piece of dance and the dancer lifts off into the air and you don't know whether they're ascending or descending. There's this moment of suspension.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel that, and that's what I crave, is those moments where you lift off with a bunch of actors with great writing, and in this case with great music, and it sort of is, it transports you and then hopefully transports the audience.
Yeah, it's a beautifully put, and that whole kind of desire to lean into the unknown and serve your curiosity and to find something that you can come away from with a better understanding, and if you do a great job, then we will too. This was very deep, though. I mean, this wasn't just taking on the role of somebody who works in an orchestrated environment and conducts from somewhere special. You had to really embody that skill. I mean, and it is one of the most difficult things in music to truly understand unless you do it.
Yeah, conducting. Yeah, it's a piece of alchemy.
It's metronomic. It's emotional. There's everything that is in music, but it's also, you have to be responsible for all of these players.
But it's profound control and discipline.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we understand in elite sports, men and women, and I think we understand it in concert musicians and, musicians that you would showcase on the show all the time. That sense of discipline and long-term preparation in order to play the music, great music. But it's not often thought about with actors, and the other thing is, it's hopefully when you play a role, when you embody something and with a bunch of people, that people don't think about the preparation. They just get transported in the way that they get transported with a great piece of music.
Yeah.
But there was a lot that I had to do to even understand the alchemy of conducting, because it's such a weird, contrapunctal, uncoordinated looking profession, because from an audience perspective, you see the back.
Yeah.
They seem out of sync with the music, because of course you have to be ahead, always a breath ahead of the musicians whilst being absolutely in the moment, which I sort of understood from many, many years being on stage. I understood that relationship to an audience.
That you have to be a beat or a half a beat ahead just in order to make sure that there's a chemistry, there's a synergy within the performance.
Well, when you're working, if you're playing Blanche Dubois or Hedda Gabler or Electra, then, you know that there's a kind of, then the audience will often know the story, like those great orchestral works, Mahler 5, which is at the heart of the film Tar, is that you have to surprise the audience, and you know what's coming, and you know the breadth and the energy that you need to get there. But you also know that, in fact, a prop has just broken that you're going to need in 5 minutes' time, and so your brain is also working on a technical level, and a light has gone up on upstage right, so you won't be able to stand where you need to stand. So how are you going to do that? So you're sort of riffing a lot of the time, and that's the exciting thing, is that you can rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and prepare and prepare and prepare, but then you've got to be alive to the happy accidents that happen.
That connection between the theatre and this particular role, it makes total sense. And in a way, I wonder whether Todd, the director, he recognised that as well, that you would be more not prepared, but just open to this particular type of role, given that you'd spent time on the theatre, and that's where Lydia Tár lives, is on a theatre in front of musicians.
Yeah, on a stage.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd also, with my husband, I'd run a big cultural institution in Australia, so I understood the pull between the kind of the administrative fundraising end of something, the HR end of running, having 200 employees and needing to foster emerging artists whilst supporting mid-career artists, and having a diverse programming and being as inclusive as possible. And then you get to escape to the rehearsal room. So I don't know whether Todd knew that.
It's just reality and fantasy on steroids. I mean, it is just the human experience, and then what it translates into the passion on just all steams ahead, right?
What for me?
For you, when you're running something like that, but you also, you're doing it from a place of passion, the original passion from the theatre, wanting to be a part of fostering the creative vision of others, using your experience. But then to your point, leaning into that space of like HR, people's expectations, people's livelihoods, ego of people when they haven't reached their goal yet.
Yeah, I mean, do you find that with what you do? Because obviously you have this massive platform, and so there's a sense that you've got to be really. You have to lean into the things that interest you, right? Because if you're not engaged, then there's not a snowflake's chance in hell that the listener's going to be engaged. Yeah. But then, do you feel like, well, I've played a lot from this genre, I really need to push into this genre?
Definitely.
I mean, how much do you?
Definitely the same, because first of all, I love all kinds of music. That was something I was blessed with at birth. I've never leaned into one genre, and so from my perspective, it's finding a connection between all those things, and the only thing that really matters there is authenticity and the ability to really sell it. And that sounds like a gross thing to say, but selling's not bad if you love something.
Yeah.
Making others feel something, trying to put them in a place where they open their ears just a tiny little bit more to listen to something. And so I definitely do. And I feel that if I'm indulging a little bit in one particular area, then I'll pivot deliberately. It's conscious.
But it's also what you're doing and this is what really, I mean, I've really noticed in the last few years, maybe it's because I've been around for a while, but the lack of the creative producer, and so I mean I now really, really appreciate a really well produced album, and it's what you do is you juxtapose things, because it's often people might like a particular track, but when you juxtapose it straight away with another sound, you listen to the next song incredibly differently.
I was talking to an artist about this the other day, and I was saying every great artist will get to a point where they're willing to let go of any expectation or anything they've achieved before, where they're willing to absolutely ignore the ambition that drove them as a young person and start all over again, and I think that is when you really start doing your best work. I really do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's when you can feel something about to break.
Yeah.
You kind of, I mean, it's that wabi-sabi thing, isn't it? Is that something is truly beautiful when there's a flaw in it. And you have to lean into the broken part, which is where failure happens, which is where, it's so publicly exposing it. I've got 4 kids and I know that their generation is profoundly terrified of failure.
Oh my gosh.
It's so public, and so they feel that their failure becomes bigger than what they're going to learn from it. I mean, and that's where Todd and I connected, is that neither of us were frightened of that feeling. And that's where, this film that we've made together, it's a process film. It's a rehearsal film. It's not.
It is.
And so the experience, talking about art imitating life, the process of making it was so innovating, and I felt so alive, because even though I knew the story, I didn't exactly know how it was going to
just the way you get to stretch out into it. There were times when I watched this film, Kate, where I felt like it wasn't a film. I really felt like I was watching the rushes of a documentary that had yet to be turned into something.
Oh, that's so cool. Because that Todd said from the beginning, that he really wanted to. It's a terrible moment when you go and you watch a film about filmmaking, or you watch a film about a painter, or you watch a film about a musician, or and you think, please don't turn the canvas around because I know that someone from the art department painted that. Oh no, I was hoping you were going to be greater than that. He really wanted it to be a fly on the wall. So when we were rehearsing the Mahler's Fifth, he wanted to feel like it was just like a documentary, and we were fortunate in that we were working. I mean, I will never ever forget it. I mean, I didn't think when I came out of drama school that I'd be standing up conducting the Dresden Philharmonic, and they had to act, so they were our actors, and it was really, there were some big stakes moments that they had to do. I mean, they were outside their comfort zone. I was outside my comfort zone, and somehow you find that thing, together that neither of you expected, which was really exciting.
There has to be a little bit of imposter syndrome that surely goes along with the idea of stepping into a role, in particular if it's
I live in the imposter syndrome.
Exactly. But of course, that can take on different faces. And sometimes it's fun to do that. And sometimes it can really strike at you at the core of your own sense of self-belief. Do I have the confidence? Can I do this? Now, when you're standing in front of a group of musicians like that, and this is what they do, and they look at people like you who do it for real, were there ever moments when you stepped up there, rehearsal or no rehearsal, and had to feel that, had to embody Tár and become that, where you were like, am I going to break out of my character here because someone over there is playing the violin looked at me a little funny, or am I, you know what I mean?
It took a long time to win over the double basses. I will not lie. The horn section I was warned about.
Double basses.
No, look, the conductors that I spoke to, and watch a myriad of documentaries and listen to lots of recordings, but when they talk about their work, they do speak about that thing of having to will they be able to rise to the great music that they're attempting to channel through themselves to the orchestra back out to the audience. So I think all great musicians must feel that, but I think what you learn to do is shift the energy of that terror into a productive way. Yeah. But the problem is, I think where the character is tragic in a way, I think, is that she's at a point where she's so profoundly estranged from herself and from her gift, and she started to think, which I think a lot of you would know this, a lot of recording artists at a certain point in their career, they get really obsessed with legacy.
Well, it's identity theft as well. So what happens is you create this identity that ultimately gives you the fuel to go and achieve these wonderful things. And you take elements of your true self, but ultimately, and there's nothing wrong with this, Bowie did it his whole life. You find a way to develop identity, grow and grow and grow. But if you don't keep an eye on it, it can turn on you. And what I got from this character was that she was completely consumed by her identity.
Yeah, her public identity.
That's right. Yes,
and her identity as a the
expectation of her,
the intendant of a major orchestra, and very aware of the sacrifices that get there. But the film's a lot about the time that it takes to get to that place, and how much time you have to spend. I mean, she's about to turn 50, she's thinking about time left rather than time spent. And she's also thinking that, in a way, the bravest thing she needs to do as an artist is to bust that all apart and let it go. Because it's, Peter Brook says this really beautiful thing, that you've got to hang on tightly and let go lightly. And that once you get near or into a position of power, it's an intoxicating force. I mean, yes, this is about a concert musician, but it could just as easily have been about an architect or, someone who's, the guru of Apple Music, No, but you know what I mean? Like once you're in a certain position, you think, well, how do I keep evolving here? And is the power actually making me become... I don't know the answer to this question, but is it calcifying my relationship to the instincts and the kind of the questions that drove me into kind of even arriving in this seat right now?
That's why the opening scene, which is, I've never seen anything like this, where you've been sitting in a seat watching a film, and I don't know the exact duration because I wasn't keeping time, but it was I want to feel it felt like nearly
27 minutes. I don't know.
It must be over 10 of that interview where it's really. I mean, first of all, I'm not even going to get to the detail of how it begins, and it's also.
Oh, you mean the talk right at the beginning? It's almost like a prologue.
Yeah, so it's a prologue at the beginning, and it really introduces the character in a lot of different layers, and it also introduces the way people feel about the character in that moment in time, which is pure reverence. And you're someone who's been so heavily revered throughout your life for the work that you do, and yet you seem to wear it and carry it in a way that's realistic. A lot of people struggle with it, and I wonder kind of how reverence feels, the real reverence in real life.
I don't know. For everybody who, might revere you, there's many people who revile you. I mean, I think you have to take the good with the bad. It's hard to know what to do with praise. It's sort of and I think I realised very early on, that there were. Well, and this is something I share with Todd too, I think, is that when I came out of drama school all those years ago, I don't think anyone really knew what to do with me. I didn't fit into a box, and I certainly didn't think I had a film career. That wasn't on my horizon. So I sort of just had to seize any opportunity that came my way, or make an opportunity out of something that looked like a piece of trash to somebody else, and sort of become my own. I don't know. I just had to look around for things, and also I didn't really have any place in particular I wanted to get. I had a vague, someone asked you, they always ask you when you leave high school, what do you want to do with your life? I went, I want to travel with my work.
What a great answer.
That was all I wanted to do.
No, but that's a beautiful answer, because a lot of the times, you most certainly have and continue to do so. And not just, I know what you mean by that, but also travel through your work.
Yeah. I mean, that is the joy and privilege of being a working actor, is that you do get to inhabit lots of different identities, and so it's really taught me that my sense of identity, who I am or how people perceive me, it's a fluid thing, so it's not something that I've ever spent a lot of time dwelling on, or and I'm hoping it doesn't sort of calcify too quickly, because I find it can be limiting. I'd rather think about other people's experiences.
This is quite an experience, and this character is really interesting for me. I respected her greatly, and I admired her ability and the climb and the destination. There was times I struggled to connect with her, or
you can use the L word. You can say that you didn't like her.
I didn't really like her.
You don't have to put your thumb up.
But I really liked her when she was with her daughter. So
you struggled to find
likability there, except for those moments when you could see she was striving to like herself. That was, maybe I'm overthinking it. I'm an overthinker, but when she was with her daughter, you could see that she was really searching for a way to get back to her true nature, and then she'd have to go back and almost be the person people needed her to be.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I think we like to be able to place people and their concerns, their jobs, their perspectives into neat little bundles and of 20 characters, and we the thing I always think about a character, whether it's a character in a novel or a character in film, one that I've played, one that I've watched, is that we're different. We're different people with all the different people we encounter, and I wanted to make that relationship with her daughter very special. It was like an island that she was a very different creature with. But I also think and it's probably hard for me to be objective about it, but I think with the character that we don't want to like her because she does and says things.
I mean, she's very funny.
Funny and nice, yeah. She's some of the situations she finds herself in are absurd. Yeah. But we don't want to like her because she does things, because of this fly-on-the-wall filmmaking. Yeah. You see her do things like steal things, take things, react to things in the way that we might, but we don't want to admit that we do. Yeah. You don't have to be a concert musician to sort of do and say things that you sort of regret later.
Yeah. The sound design on this film is so fascinating to me. The film at the very core of it is about creating sound that is from a pure place, that is there to inspire, to heal, to emote, to push people to feel something, all senses. And yet the way that it's used throughout the film is as an essentially important addition to the tension of this film. I mean, the doorbell translated and transposed over to the piano.
Yes, it's a great moment, isn't it?
Because it's weird. As someone who's gone to music my whole life and made it outside of my family and friends my life, I found it was giving me anxiety. And that's not something music often does. It's very cleverly done.
Yeah. She has I don't know if you have this because you spend so much time listening so deeply.
Yeah.
But she has a thing that I didn't even know was a syndrome or a quote-unquote disorder, was misophonia, which, innocent sounds to the average ear can produce terror and rage and almost be amplified.
Yeah.
There's a Roald Dahl story. I think it's called The Box. And it's about a man who invents a machine that where he can hear all organic sounds. He can hear the grass growing. He can feel the leaves, falling off the tree. Saying, "Here we go!" and then he puts it into his ear, and he can't turn it off. So that means he hears the scream of the blades of grass as they're being mown. And so that sort of quality is the downside of her gift, is that she has an acute sensitivity to sound, and a lot of conductors that I spoke to have a similar thing. And so silence is an incredibly
important thing. Yeah.
So for me, I love Mahler's Fifth Symphony. I love his second. I love the third. They were all magnificent. But someone was asking me the other day what was my favorite movement, and I said, well, really, it's between the end of the scherzo, in that breath, when the orchestra rearranges themselves to play the Adagietto. It's the suspension. It's that moment of silence that is made by sound stopping. Yeah,
that's the notes between the notes, and that's why I always. It's funny as well, because when you see characters or you hear music by people that you can tell that they reach a certain height in their life, something visceral that they can't feel in the day-to-day. They only feel it in that moment. I always feel like that's how Coltrane felt, or someone when he wasn't in the moment, lost in all of that beauty, that real life was hard for him, was hard for people.
Yeah.
That's why I think there's a lot of distractions in real life when they're not playing music that ultimately take people down.
Yeah, I think so, because it's an energy that flows. It's a life force, and there's many different types of music. Of course, it's in this particular film. And I always turn to music when I'm thinking about a character, because it speaks to the soul of the person, the thing that they're either estranged from, or they're yearning to express, or that people don't understand.
Okay, you bring that into the character even if it's not an essential part of the character's personality.
Yeah, and often it's contrapunctual, because what I did in this instance, I'd heard that Simon Rattle he'd said once that from a young child, he heard music all the time. And he just thought that this was something that everybody did. And then he realised, in fact, this wasn't, normal.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to put an earwig in my ear, and I'm going to be listening to music the whole time. Every time I'm having lunch with someone in a scene, or I'm talking to the orchestra, I'm going to be hearing something. There's a kind of a level of distraction or preoccupation that makes you feel like you're, the character's alive. And then I thought, oh, well, of course it's going to be Mahler that I listened to. But I listened to so many Gregorian chants and Gorecki and Xenakis. And then, I'd put on the Triffids, or, I'd put on tribal drums, because often, and then sometimes I would literally listen to 60 beats a minute, or I'd listen to sort of 125 beats a minute, when in fact the character was walking really slow, because you realise that oftentimes we sit on levels of anxiety professionally that you have to, particularly right now, Zane, right now.
No.
No, not now. My heartbeat's slowing down. But, it's sometimes our mind, our spirit is, or our distracted brain is working, even though we might be moving and speaking slowly, something else is going on internally. And I think in terms of your Coltrane reference, I think that's, you're constantly hearing music, experiencing the music, I imagine, but then not being able to play it and release it.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, the music, Bernstein said, is that, that the inhalation is the inspiration, and the exhalation breathes out with the music. And to not being able to breathe with your instrument, I mean, that's the biggest thing, is when, as a conductor, you can't play unless you have your instrument, that human instrument in front of you.
And yet she is so challenging on a human interaction level. She struggles to connect with people, I think. I think she has a hard time.
Don't we all?
But there is a definitely a stronger correlation between someone who needs to inspire people in such an incredible way and then when she's not on the podium, struggles to identify. I mean, it makes total sense that you are listening to music and trying to find ways to move in and outside of other people in your environment, because it's always like she's always either disinterested, in a hurry. There's something always going on that's distracting her.
A distraction, from the thing, you know. And I think that's, in a way, she's very, very estranged from herself.
Yeah.
As a lot of people, I think, we became estranged from ourselves, and then we found ourselves in the pandemic.
Thank you therapy.
Thank you therapy, which she probably hasn't done enough of.
Yeah.
You know, and then we find ourselves in silence, isolated, unable to ignore who we are. And it was a really confronting moment for,
That's a big one.
All of us. Yeah.
That was a big one for me. I mean, that was, I know exactly the phase of my life when you know, what I'd created wasn't communicating or connected properly to my true self. And it requires a great unpacking, and she didn't get there.
No. Well, or did she?
Maybe she was taken there.
Yeah, because I mean, it's also, she's you know, something maybe, I mean, I think any connection that you have with a character is, to you personally, is going to exist. You don't have to mine that too deeply.
Sure.
But something that I did connect to is the sense that people didn't know how to categorize her because she'd done a lot of different things. And there's a sense that it's easier for people if you just do the one thing. And the fact that she'd gone down the Ukulele Valley with the Shipibo Kanibo people, and here she was running the greatest orchestra of all time, getting ready to perform Mahler, you juxtapose those two things, you think, wow, okay, so which one are you? Yeah. And, you know, you can be both of those things simultaneously.
But you're right, the institutions that are there to support and foster the culture that she's in, I never felt they were 100% on board. They appreciated the success, and they appreciated her talents and abilities. There's always a feeling that when she closed the door in another reality beyond the film.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the boards of cultural institutions, I mean, shareholders, stakeholders, you know, advertisers, the people at the top who run the multinationals, who ultimately own all of these creative companies that we all work for. You know, it's they can totally get in the way, because you wonder, you think, well, I'm in control of the music, am I not? You know, this is what she's saying to herself. I'm the reason why you're all here. So shouldn't you just let me do what I'm doing? But of course, they've got a lot of compliance issues, you know, and she lives in a different world. If she's the wrong, the right person at the wrong time, you know.
You know, power, that's the word. And it really is one of those things where it's like you achieve a certain amount of success and respect, and that translates into power, and then people are attracted to it, and then it can become this very murky world of who does what and what's relatable and what's considered appropriate or inappropriate. And we live in a time now, and this is something that you have children, we have kids, I have a 16 and 14-year-old. I mean, the thrash that's happening now is, and it's good. I mean, in the end, it's going to be great because boundaries and clarity are important. But there are some stories. There are real stories out here that are confusing. It's a confusing time. And this character plays into that brilliantly, I think, because on the one hand, it's hard for me not to feel like there's some responsibility at play here. She's always trying to stay ahead of the story. She's trying to get rid of the emails, do this. But at the end of it, it's like I never really feel like anything was actually presented that was clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the subtlety of Todd's screenplay, and that she's a person who is constantly, which is admirable as an artist, is that she's always wanting to subvert expectations, not just for an audience, but for herself. But then when she feels that people on a personal level, a professional level, are starting to predict what she's going to do to her own detriment and to the detriment of others, she will she'll swerve and go the opposite direction, which is quite an immature thing to do.
Well, there's people constantly trying to get in front of her and say, just stop and face the situation. This can be resolved if we face the situation and figure out what is real. And she just is, like, to your point, she's off somewhere else and is, using the work as the North Star at all times.
Yeah. And I mean, her partner in work and life, and played by the great Nina Hoss. It was so great to work with her.
Yeah, amazing.
That they've had this fantastic partnership, which is, it's threatening to bust up. And I do think it's to do with the fact that on a human level, she's thinking about time left. It's like, what do I need to do? And as a parent, as someone in a relationship, you do find yourself sometimes, I think, on a solitary path, even though we see her in a massive community of musicians and in a really kind of previously successful musical partnership and a relationship. So it's, there's a lot going on.
Do you think in some respects, thinking about where she ends up in the film, and ultimately it feels like I think in a way you could say it was taken out of her hands and she ultimately lost control, but I wonder whether that was by design in a subconscious way all the way along, that she was looking for something else all the way along. Yeah,
I think unconsciously there is it's a creative force. We talk about making something, giving birth to something, bringing something into the world, but there's a parallel force in creativity which is profoundly destructive. And, you think about Eve Klein, burning the money, I'm sure. It's a political act as much as anything else, over the Seine, or leaping into the air or risking death. I think as an artist, you have to be inconsistent in order to keep things fresh. We're not political figures, really. I mean, and this is the complicated thing, isn't it, is that you then have a platform, and so people ask you to weigh in on supposed political issues. But you want to be engaged in the world, but you are a rolling stone in the sense that you move. You're moving with the thing that you're absorbing and reacting to. It was never like that hundreds or thousands of years ago. I mean, the role of art was there to entertain, and even if it created a perspective, it was never to influence the chamber. Or the those in power. It was never that. It was a reflection of the time, but never to influence. I agree. The idea of influence within the arts is the difference between reflection and influence. I think if you want to reflect on something and your voice be heard, just the same as it is by anybody up or down any street, that's fine. But if you're expected to influence, that's heavy as the head that wears the crown in that. But it's also you can't know what is going to connect with people. And you go back in time, centuries ago. I mean, artists were pariahs. They were on the outside. They were terrifying figures. They were shamanic, and they were profiteers, or they said things that were, you had to, if you were saying something inside the court, you were performing inside the court, and you wanted to say anything provocative, it had to be done through symbolism and metaphor. That's right. But now it's sort of either, big P political, or it's just entertainment. Speaking of entertainment, you have been in some of the most brilliantly created and entertaining films, and it's a fine line between the two. There's a lot of entertainment out there. Yes, there's a lot of, I hate the word content. Content's the worst. It's the worst. But you know what? It's almost I was going to say, it almost is an appropriate term because it is so dismissive, and that's what a lot of it is, right? And it's great. It's great to create. It's great to share. Everyone really in this planet should have a right to be able to create and to share, right? Yeah. But it ultimately fills up, if you let it, it can fill up the finite amount of space we have to absorb, and we do have a finite amount of space. I feel like, you don't ever do anything as far as your work is concerned unless you absolutely want to do it. I don't honestly think that that's the case for everybody. I think some people feel they have to. Some people have different priorities. What ultimately gets you back in front of the camera? What is it? If you could boil it down to something simple or just a constant that inside yourself burns deep, that when I have to do this. Well, I find it very hard to say no, and maybe I should get better at it. I mean, I say no in a lot of ways. I was going to say, I don't. But no to a creative, when someone throws the gauntlet down creatively. Sometimes it's you can help something get made, something that you that if you're a small part of, then that story can be told. Sometimes it's that you can be, if you have a kind of a platform or access to something, that you can facilitate something. And sometimes it's just because I read something, or I have a conversation with someone, and I want to be part of that ongoing conversation, because it's the process in the end. Because the process itself, it doesn't always have to be enjoyable, but stimulating. And then I think the thing has a chance to be something. I mean, sometimes it's just to have fun, to be honest. But it's usually just about, I don't know, the decision is already made before I've made it consciously, I think. And sometimes it's, a reaction to something you've done before. You feel like, oh, I've been exercising that muscle, and this arm's beginning to atrophy, and then something comes along, and you think, oh, I can learn to use my fingers again. Or
Okay. So you great at shoulders, great upper body, struggle a bit with the legs in terms of like the muscles.
But I've got a bunion.
Okay, fair enough. You've got a great excuse. But I mean, over the course of your work, what has been the area where the muscle required the most amount of work that ultimately you felt, oh, okay, this is something that's really going to stretch me in a big way?
Silence. I talk too much. I do too much. And it's really time to be silent. So
how's that
here
working
comes
out
the
for
John
you?
Cage. It's not working particularly well this morning. But I think it's silence. So my kids are constantly saying, would you just do one thing at a time? And then I say to them, okay, well, can you do your washing then? And then I might.
It doesn't work.
I've always had a sense that life is incredibly short. And so, being part of something, being out there and being engaged, but it's also, it's sometimes good to be really simple. I mean, Matisse says this fantastic thing. It's just, don't try and be original. Just be simple. And if something is, and be good, you have to be good technically, but then if something is there, it'll flow through you.
I'm so glad you said that, because a friend of mine who was working on a big album, and everyone around us was like, it's got to be something. We've got to do something original with this. And I called him.
Oh my God, that's death.
It's worst. It's the worst. And he said, you know what, mate? You know what? I don't really like that word, make something original. Like, you could go and like fucking ride a bike on Mars, yeah? But will anyone watch it? And I just love that. And I think we do put a huge amount, especially because we do a great job of we've democratized creativity to such a degree. We've established that's a great thing to such a degree that I think we are experiencing some form of limitation in terms of what we see on screen, what we hear in our headphones. However, anyone creates, maybe with the exception of Canvas, where I really feel people can immerse themselves in something abstract enough where it feels out of control. But I worry sometimes that we're heading towards a loop.
What, a linear, literal loop?
Yeah, a little bit, because
where you start hearing yourself back.
Yeah, and you just
feedback.
Exactly, and the idea of originality becomes all the more impossible to achieve.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of things that we see. I mean, the streamers are voracious, and they make spaces that need to be filled, and then they have a certain way of developing things so that even things that seem to be about things differently, they taste the same. They're made in the same way.
And they stay around about the same amount of time as everything else. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
We're on to the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I love discovering things on walks or going into, I'm not vaguely religious at all, but, going into a cathedral and just sitting and smelling that and just thinking, wow, this, for good or ill, has been here for a long time, and a lot of people have moved through with a lot of yearning and prayers and hopes and dreams, and they've sat here. It's like, my favourite spaces.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and old theatres, because every time you finish a show, it gets painted back to black, and you just need to scratch your nail down, and you go, my God, there's
the layers.
Centuries of history.
I know.
These walls hold such an amount of, energy and ideas.
Do you feel the history when you walk into a room? Are you attuned? Do you go like, oh man, I can? Because sometimes I go in recording studios and I'm like, I can still hear the notes. I can feel the experience in here.
Definitely. There was this place, a friend of mine, Julian Roosevelt, who's what do you call them anymore? A video artist.
Sure.
In Berlin, we shot this thing about artist manifestos, and one of the manifestos we shot in these 3 rooms in Berlin in a sound university.
Yeah.
And one was a completely dead space. and one was a really live space. And being inside the dead space.
Isn't that the weirdest thing ever? I've done it as well.
Yeah. Did it freak you out?
You know what's really interesting is that from DJing for years and years, I developed a manageable but pretty consistent low tinnitus, right? So I can hear it, but I've learned to live with it and it's cool. When I was in that room, complete silence, a dead space, no sense of echo, reverberation or reverb, it went down.
Did it?
It went down. I could barely hear it. It was the craziest thing.
I would have thought it would have been the opposite. That's really interesting. No. Could you feel or hear your heartbeat?
Yeah, I could hear my heartbeat. I could hear things I've never heard before. Like, it's so strange. You sort of hear a tiny little rustle. I don't even know what that was. Was it like a follicle? Like, I don't know. It was really weird. But what was interesting to me was I thought that I would feel some kind of anxiety being in that space because, again, of what I was going to hear and being all too aware of my environment and being a little bit like you by the sounds of it, needing to move all the time.
Restlessness, it's called.
I've got to fill it.
In the biz.
I got to fill it. I got to fill it because if I don't fill it, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I just didn't. It was calming and everything I was worried about just fell away.
But you surrendered. I think there's so few moments in our lives where we truly, truly surrender. And, that's a great act of humility, and it is somehow accepting our powerlessness and that we have an incredible power in that moment through surrendering to an experience. Positive experience.
Well, I often say,
not a brutal, abusive experience.
It's true. But I often say that the true act of letting go exists at birth and exists at death, and everything in between we're just trying to hold on to way too tight.
Yeah.
And
old age, though, bladder control. That's something I'm not looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to that one.
Have you figured out how you're going to do it yet? It's weird. I've been thinking
about
diapers.
It's that simple.
It's a good solution.
Oh my God! Speaking of adult diapers,
okay.
I was on stage. I was on Broadway.
That's the TikTok clip. Mark that one up.
And it was New Year's Eve, and so we had to do the show on New Year's. We had to get out because Times Square was going to fill up.
Yeah.
And someone told me one of the most depressing facts is that apparently on New Year's Eve in New York, the sale of adult diapers goes through the roof because once you get into Times Square, you can't get out, and you're drinking beer, you're eating pizza. It's like, God, don't you think the garbage collectors need to be the best paid people on the planet, particularly on New Year's Day?
Yeah, that big bonus day. But I would say that the moment that you go into a store as an adult who lives a life that's probably to some degree within equilibrium, a balance there, work, live, family, raise, eat, nurture,
surrender,
pay bills, a little bit of surrender here and there maybe on New Year's Eve. But the day that you go into a store, consciously and willingly buy some adult diapers.
And I am going to ring in the new year in my own...
Put those fucking things on. I'm going for it.
I'm
going for it.
I mean, that is going...
You got your diapers?
Yeah.
You got your diapers? Don't be a fucking idiot.
Yeah,
put your fucking diapers on.
Yeah, double bag yourself,
We're
mate.
not doing it like 2017 again, mate. It's not happening.
Learn your lesson.
Have you figured it out? Talk about weird things to think about, right? You talk about life being too short. It's an interesting observation again. I don't disagree about that idea of like feeling like you need to make the most of time. Have you figured out how you're gonna like really
die?
Yeah, like really age? Like is it like a really comfortable hospital bed with a great view and Bellinis every hour on the hour? Like just top me up until I go. Like, have you thought about it?
That sounds good. Look, I mean, God, I mean, I just had a friend whose her father passed away really unexpectedly, and all you can say to yourself in that moment is it was quick.
Yeah.
I want to be prepared for it.
Okay, that's interesting. Preparation. So
I think, people too talk about, a lot of people when I was at university, in their early 20s, and I thought it was a bit morbid at the time, but maybe not. Everyone was reading the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and I just...
Okay, what university did you go to, mate?
I don't know, the University of Life.
Okay, now, most people were reading something, we're not reading at all.
Beano. They were reading Beano.
Where's Kate? You don't want to know, mate.
She's preparing for her own death. She's turned 21. She's ready. No, I don't know. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, I hope I'm surrounded by those that I love. As corny as that sounds.
No, that's the number one. Number two is I just want to be glamorous and glorious. I just want to look as cute as I can. And
Barbara Cartland.
Yeah. Bellinis every hour on the hour.
Yeah.
Top me up until I'm done.
That sounds good.
Nurse Ratchet
No,
you know, just
I don't know
feed
if I'd
it.
want Nurse Ratched in the mix.
Glamorous Nurse Ratched.
Now we're delving into places that maybe you and your wife should delve into, and you shouldn't go any further with me in a public space. Let's just stop right
Don't
there.
tar me, mate. Don't tar me with that.
You know, the person who was ready to pass over across used to be the most powerful magnetic person in the village.
Yeah.
You wanted to be around them because you knew
Yeah.
that they were about to see and experience something that was mystical and magical.
Surely is it the only time that we can truly create context out of it all?
Yeah. And look, I mean, I remember when my grandmother, maternal grandmother who I grew up with, and my mother was with her when she died, and she said it was the biggest privilege of my life to be there when she passed away.
Yeah, my wife said the same thing. She went and had that experience with her father. My mum has dementia right now and is...
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks. And it's such a brutal way. I mean, it's like horrible to see. And it really makes... What it really drove home for me was memories. Like the only currency that truly matters out of any of this is experience.
Yeah. And also music. That's the thing.
Yes, because she dances and that's what that's how she communicates is through movement and music.
Oh, God, that's what I wanted. I want to go out dancing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just have to make her safe so she's not going to injure herself. But if you can go out dancing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I've got some amazing videos of her like dancing to Peter Gabriel, and it's like she goes somewhere else, and it's just wild to watch. And that's what's so beautiful about things like music is that it speaks the language. We always try to... I spent my whole life dancing about architecture.
Yes.
Right? All I'm doing is trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And what I figured out is you will never figure it out. But it's great for the curiosity value. And if you're a fan, I just get story after story. But it is... How can you not believe in magic and then hear what you heard on the podium and understand what it feels like to be in that room? How can you not believe him? I mean, it's magic.
It is magic. It is miraculous, I think. And that's the thing is we talk about miracles as coming from other places, but I mean music is connected to another realm, I think, and you know and that's why there's nothing beats the live experience. You know, there is something miraculous about it. You know, when someone makes a note and puts another note beside it, and you know the human voice. I mean, unaccompanied human voices melding, you know, throat singers. I mean, they're there, look, coulda, shoulda, woulda.
I know.
If only I could have been a throat singer.
And that's right, fatale, huh? I mean, unbelievable. And I mean, that's why I love Jeff Buckley so much, is because he looked to translate that into something that we could identify and understand. He went and did the work and then tried to be inspired, as others have, be inspired enough to translate that. How does music play a role in your life outside of your work?
Well, I used to listen to music all the time. Speaking of dancing, you know, when we had 2 kids, now we have 4.
Yeah.
There used to be music every morning. We'd wake up at 6 a.m. and just put something random on, and all of us would dance around the house. And then, of course, as they get older, they have to go to a thing called school. You know, and then you have to do a thing called a job.
Do they though?
Do they though? They're 16. I mean, they'll learn to read one day, right? You know, and then the house got noisier and noisier, and so I'd always listen to music. You know, our cars.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully electric vehicles.
Yep.
And we will solve the lithium problem with batteries.
Yep.
We're on it.
Yep.
But you know that's a really private space. People, you know, do things I used to listen to a lot of music in the car.
I was driving here today and I had this experience. I don't know, I was on the plane coming back from London last night and I had a Bloody Mary and I put on an Oasis live at Nebworth thing, and it was 1996 and Liam's just up there and he sounds like an angel and Noel's amazing and there's 125,000 young men and women getting smashed on
Did you
pints.
cry?
I cried.
Yeah.
I cried because there was a moment in Slide Away when he just hits this note and everything just elevates, even on a plane. And I got my car and I put on Slide Away. And I nearly called Noel. I'm glad I didn't. I nearly called Noel Gallagher on a Friday night just to randomly tell him, which is a no-no. And I
But at Glastonbury this year, listening to that played again, it was just like the whole, like 25, you know, how many, 250,000 people? It was just like everyone was singing that song. There's something.
Let me be the one who shines with you and we can slide away. Slide away. Come on, fucking Patsy left me with nothing but a fucking tea bag. Come on.
Oh my God. See, there we go. You can go home a happy man.
I've had a great time hanging out with you.
Likewise.
It's been really fun. And, I really, this movie was not initially, on paper, this movie is not for me. As an anxious human being who looks to music to relieve my anxiety, I found this to be a tense and very enthralling watch. And I want to say, though, at the end of it, I was blown away. I love it. And you pulled off an incredible feat in this film of humanizing somebody whose life is just falling complicated and kind of falling down around her at a pace which is not normal for film.
Yeah.
Normally, the reveal happens quicker than it does, but boy, when it does, it falls apart real quick.
Yeah.
And so the tension that you had to exist in as a character for most of this film.
It's a ghost story in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I love a ghost story.
Yeah. Well, here's the ghost stories.
Yeah. Cheers.